Yes, I'm good.
Okay, cool. So for this one,
So we did wrap up that one question of what would take.
yeah,
Okay.
to cross over. This one, probably not so much debate, but would be curious to hear what you guys think. If you could specify, regardless of what you believe now, the religion that you were raised in, or the religious environment that you were raised in, and if you had to be analytical about it, what was the best influence it had on your politics, and maybe the worst? Maybe you've come around on it now, or maybe you're struggling with, I still believe this, and it impacts my politics in a way I wish it didn't. Yeah, if you could talk a little bit about your religious upbringing.
Yeah, so my religious upbringing, I was raised Catholic, and still have like a lot of those same values. I don't believe in abortion, like regardless, even in the cases of rape or incest. I've felt that way, like since I was like young, and I think like being Catholic and stuff and everything, and still like a lot of values and stuff and everything about the importance of family, and I try to live up to those values and stuff still to this day. So.
My mother was Catholic, I guess. Well, she was raised Catholic. I wasn't raised Catholic. My father, I believe, was a Baptist. He's from down south. But like wasn't a lot of like religion wasn't like a factor of my household really. We a small run for maybe like a year or two where we went to church very consistently. Went to Baptist church. I'd say the more positive thing I would agree with you is that kind of sense of belonging, sense of family, sense of like kind of people taking care of one another. I continue to seek that out in kind of other areas of my life, but I think one of the things I found least satisfying about it is really kind of definitely informed my politics moving forward is this kind of idea of exclusionism. And it's like, well, if you're not one of us, then you're some sort of heathen or irredeemable or sinner or like all of these judgments of people who are just living lifestyles that are not like theirs. And I guess my critique of religious activity that at least I participated in was that like, how do you know? You know what I mean? And it's like, that's not to knock anybody's religion. Like, I believe in God. I pray all the time. I've had a few conversations with God, or at least I like to think so. But that being said, I don't know for sure. For all I know, those are just voices in my head, and those are just words in a book, and so on down the line. And so, like, not knowing that, I think it's important to kind of respect everybody's beliefs equally. And I feel like all religions kind of, regardless if that's Christianity or Catholicism or Judaism or Buddhism, have some element of kind of built-in judgment of people who are not like them as being inferior or sinister or evil. And as somebody who doesn't ascribe to a religion, it's tough for me to find that as a positive, even though that is kind of the joining factor of religion, right? It's like, we're all the same, we're not like other people, that's why we're here together. I think that kind of element of it is the most toxic thing about religion.
Right. So then I guess like a preview of what the next round of questions will be. I'll give you like a prompt, and if you guys can come to a consensus on no matter how big or small, despite there being a separation of church and state, America is not a secular country, even though each generation kind of becomes a bit more secular. What role should America or should religion play in America, and what role or roles should it not? It exists, so it has to play some sort of role at the moment. But where should it be limited, and where should its resources go to, politically speaking?
I guess my view is as limited as possible. Like, I don't, like I just said, like I think they're all inherently biased towards their own religion. And so if you believe in religious freedom, which is like the doctrine of America, then they have to be. That's tough because like I truly believe religion should have little to no influence, but that everybody's religion should be respected. So whatever compromise we could come to that's on those grounds, like I'm cool with that. Like, I'm not saying that churches have to be. I'm trying to think of like a good like. Churches shouldn't be forced to conduct a gay wedding in their church, for example. I personally, like, I'm queer. I obviously have some issue with that, but like, if that's your interpretation of your religion, and it is a house of worship, then and that you control under that religious guide, then like, cool, that makes sense. If you own like a bakery, then I don't think like your religious liberties like protect like the flour. You know what I mean? And I guess that's like the difference to me. Now, like, again, like I have my own personal issues with like queer couples who like. intentionally go to some like right wing bakery just to like get a rise out of people and like make this a news story. Like I think that's fucking stupid, and I don't understand like why you would want your wedding cake baked by somebody who hates you. That seems like a poor choice in my opinion. So I guess I wish we could find some more middle ground on stupid things like that. But yeah, if a church doesn't want to marry somebody because it's against their religion, then like I guess I could be convinced to compromise on those things, even though, like, for what it's worth, like those same arguments have been used against interracial marriage and things like that. Like my parents wouldn't have been allowed to marry in a lot of churches when they got married. That was only the 80s. You know what I mean? And so it's like I'm a little, I don't know, my hair sticks up a bit when I think of how religious freedom is kind of used. But I don't know. How far are you willing to come? Where can we meet in the middle?
Man, so like I believe like religion, like I think it's so important, like, and some everything, and like, I believe like, there should be like, prayer in public schools, and like, not necessarily like where like the schools are like, like dictated, but like, obviously like, where they teach like, classes on it. I think there are schools like that where they're public, but like, you could take like religion classes, like that's an offering. I think like, even if like, they have like church at some schools, like, even like, maybe even if it's not like necessarily a church, but a meditation space, I think like, things like that are important because like, in some everything like schools, like
Sure, like how you have the chapel at the gospel kind of thing.
Right. Like, and some everything like, for people who like, not where it's forced upon anyone, but like, and stuff, whatever
whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever your religion is, like, and stuff and everything, like,
pray to Mecca 7 times a day at school, like, go for it.
Yeah, yeah, like I'm totally fine with that, and like I think like and stuff and everything that, I always respected like everyone's religious beliefs and stuff and everything, and one of the things and stuff and everything I don't like about the right is like that they're not tolerant to some religious beliefs, particularly like Islam and stuff and everything, and I think
that's fundamental.
I think like and stuff and everything that people like and stuff and everything. What he was saying about like gay people being married in churches and stuff and everything, like I like I don't like and stuff, the bigotry of that, like and stuff and everything, and that's one of the issues and stuff and everything I've had it at churches and stuff and everything, because like I've gone to church, like to hear a sermon and stuff and everything, and they're talking about like and stuff like homosexuality and like how it's wrong and stuff and everything, and I found that to be hate speech. And stuff and everything. Like I feel like like my view of God is that He's all encompassing, He's all loving, and like and stuff and everything. He loves all people. And I have gay family members. I have gay friends and stuff and everything. I've worked with like and stuff and everything. People who are part of the LGBTQ community, and they've given me like huge opportunities and stuff and everything in life. And so like I like I want them to be able to get married, like, wherever they want to, like, but I understand, like, at this point, like, and stuff and everything, like a church, like, a bakery or like, a business, like not necessarily forcing somebody who doesn't believe in that, so like, I do think there has to be like, as far as like, I don't know, like a way to be able to make that fair, and stuff and everything, like,
not to put like the most volatile of issues on the table there, but like, what about things like abortion then? Because I guess that's my view on it. Like my reason, I've always said up until other circumstances changes in my life anyway. Like I'm anti-abortion, but I'm pro-choice. You know what I mean? Like if I was a woman and I got pregnant when I have an abortion, especially now at 29 years old, like probably not. I'd probably just figure it out. You know what I mean? If my religion dictated that I shouldn't have an abortion, I truly believed in that. Like would I want to be pressured to get an abortion? Absolutely not. That makes sense to me. But also like, if that is your body, and if, like that's your choice, and like especially depending on like where we want to draw the line of months, and I think that debate is like hazy and silly to begin with. But the idea about like whether or not you should be able to have the choice to have an abortion, like there's a religious point of view on this, which is that you shouldn't. But I also don't think that religious point of view should inform the government.
So my thoughts on abortion, I'm opposed to abortion completely. I believe like maybe like and stuff and everything in the morning after pill, like and stuff and everything, like I don't believe that abortion like and stuff and everything like should be legal, like even in cases of rape or incest. This has been my belief, like since I was a child. I was actually denied like a internship like when I was like 13 for like voicing this view and so everything but like that's just like what I believe in. I think like everybody like and stuff and everything.
Why illegal? I guess that's the part.
Okay, like I'll tell you. So I
I
have 3 children, and you know what I mean, and my second daughter like stuff and everything like when she was just born, my wife like she went like to get a pregnancy test. We didn't plan her and stuff and everything and they were like trying to urge her like stuff to get an abortion, like you already have a child, you already have 1 child and stuff and everything. We think it's a cyst, like why don't we just like and stuff and everything. And I feel like and stuff and everything, and like the African American community and stuff and everything, like that's an option, like saying all too often, like and stuff and everything, like I think like that it should be more of an emphasis on abstinence, on like having like responsible sex with people, like and stuff. Where
why do you need to make abortion illegal for that to work? Like I taking all of that.
I just don't feel like and stuff. I don't see like and stuff and everything where like that should ever be the option, like and stuff, to deprive life, like and stuff. Like my wife had chose like my daughter, who's now like and stuff 5 years old, that they were saying was a cyst, because like and stuff, that's what they promote, like particularly in hospitals, like and stuff.
And I empathize with that. Like you got bad advice for sure, in my opinion. And like I think there are definitely people who, especially in specific communities, all too often like push that as the first choice. Agree with that entirely. Would love to work to combat that. Happy to donate to any organizations you recommend. But I don't know why we need to make abortion illegal to try and combat that. You know what I mean? Like you said, institute abstinence-only programs. We can institute better sex ed, which I think is a better route towards that.
I believe it's murder. Like and stuff and everything. I believe life begins in conception. I like honestly like and stuff and everything. Like when I like I knew my wife was pregnant. Mm-hmm. Like I like at the moment, like stuff and everything. Like I knew. Like and stuff and everything. It's like hard to explain. And my wife was like,
anybody pregnant.
Yeah, it's like yeah. I was like, I know, like and stuff and everything. Like she's pregnant and stuff and everything. And like I just believe that life begins at conception and stuff and everything. And it's like you're depriving someone of the possibility of having a life before, and they have no choice in that matter. How is that fair to that person? It doesn't have a voice. Who speaks up for that person? Like, because my daughter, like and stuff and everything, like, when did she become a person? Like, I guess
that's my question. I was like, when does she become a person?
I believe
does she become a person like the minute you and your wife finish having sex? Is she a person?
Yeah, I believe so.
What if she doesn't become pregnant then? Did you just kill somebody? Is your girl a murderer now because her body didn't decide to fertilize that egg?
I mean, if she didn't,
like when does she become the person? The immediate fertilization, because that's after you finish. Those are different times. So you just change your answer. You see what I'm saying? This is
no. I believe like and stuff. No, my answer hasn't changed. I believe like
fertilization or conception.
Conception. As soon as like and stuff and everything, like like and stuff and everything, like I've ejaculated into my wife, like and stuff and everything, and life has begun.
So like what happens to all the lives you just killed that don't fertilize yet? Those don't count?
I mean, I have no control over that. I'm not God, like
You're a murderer. You should never jerk off. You should never have sex again. What's wrong with you?
To zoom out, because you guys to not just focus on the abortion issue, but to that point though, that there is a line between church and state, and they each have. There's the federal law, and then there's
state law,
spiritual law, whatever you want to call that, and those intersect at that moment, to where once you define what a life is, then it's guaranteed rights by the federal government. So with just abortion or any other Sharia law in Islam or the South with Baptists and things like that, where does that line? You can leave church and state alone, but when they do intersect, and there are these crossroads and traffic jams in that sort of sense, with the way that the country is getting a bit more insular in our little tribes, how do we navigate that in regards to that thin line between church and state?
My view on it's very simple, which is that like you are allowed to practice your religion any way you want to in your life, so long as it isn't affecting or harming others. The minute you use your religion to legislate what other people do with their bodies and their lives and their choices, then I think that's beyond government overreach or like treading into like fundamentalism.
Yeah, I pretty much like agree, like you and me, what he said about that. Like I think like as long as anybody's like not hurting anyone, like you and me and stuff, they should be able to practice their religion, whatever it is. So.
And so I guess that's what makes the abortion conversation difficult. Then it's like your view is you're hurting somebody. My view is like that's not a body yet.
Yeah, like I mean, like that's just like a total like different perspective and stuff and everything. But like
for instance, like I'm against late term abortion. Like but like people are judging. I have to keep referencing him. Gave a great answer on this the other day, which is that like nobody is pregnant at 8 months and like wants to have an abortion. You know what I mean, like you're having an abortion at 8 months because like the baby either died or your like life is at risk and all these things. Right. It's just like I can't tell that woman that like because of what I believe that like she should put her life on the line to try and bring this child who may die at birth anyway into this world instead of like saving her life and trying for another baby another time. Like you have bodily autonomy over you and your body and everything in your body. And like whether or not I agree with that, like if like do I think people should just at 8.5 months go be like, you know what? Not feeling this kid thing anymore. Painted the room, don't like the color, don't like the crib, like I'm out. And like that's horrible. I agree with you. Should we maybe even have some penalties for people like that? Debatable. But like as far as like first 3-4 months, like
let me ask you
we're
this
like
question.
arguing if there's a life.
Like so have you ever heard like and stuff or anything like what happens if you assault a person while they're pregnant and like the absorbing like so like but you're saying like you were saying it's not a person, so like why like and stuff or anything can't you punch a woman like when she's pregnant, like like at what point like
in all honesty, I don't think that should be an additional charge. Like I disagree with that entirely. Like if you say you murder a pregnant woman, like in current law, like you'd be charged with like 2 murders essentially.
Right.
Yeah, I disagree with that. That's yeah.
even if like saying like later term, like you wouldn't think like and stuff or anything like that should be like an additional or like let's say she's 8-9 months pregnant or like wouldn't.
I have a lot more sympathy for that scenario, and I'd be willing to like look at some more research on that, like think that through further. But like generally speaking, no, not really. Like my like 1,000-foot view on that is like it's your body and your choice, no matter like what those choices are. I view that same way as far as like treating addiction or treating like people who use drugs or people who don't exercise enough and are obese and are drained on their economy because of it. Like that's your body, your choice. Like you get to live your life however you want to live it, and so long as that's still a part of you, like I can be disgusted with that choice for sure. But that would be kind of what guides my view on that. Do I condone people like stabbing pregnant women in the stomach? Like obviously not. Like I think you should go to jail. Like should there be some like on top punishment for that? Sure. Should it be like a second charge? That's a second life? I don't view it that way. Similar like you have like drug possession and drug possession like in a school zone. Like yeah, sure. If you want to tack on like assault with a deadly weapon and assaulting a pregnant woman with a deadly weapon is like a different charge. Open to that.
So then last.
Did you have?
Sorry.
Sounded like did you have anything else to say to that too, or is it not?
Oh no, like I mean, I see where he's coming from and stuff and everything with that. Like my view on like just like it's just fundamentally different. I just believe like and stuff and everything like life begins at conception. I think like that it's a person like and stuff and everything. It's like it's murder. It's like that's just like how I feel like and stuff and everything. Like abortion, in my opinion, is murder, and I think like that's one of the things and stuff that is like harming like and stuff and everything, the Black community as well. Like and stuff, these organizations and stuff like Planned Parenthood.
I know I born 3 white babies, so I got you. Haven't heard the Black community at all.
No man, like and stuff and everything. Like that's funny, but like. You still will be a Black child, and stuff and everything is not, like and stuff and everything. I don't believe in like one or the other, and stuff. So.
So in an abstract manner of speaking, if you have the spectrum of like completely secular government or like a theocracy, and you put that separation of church and state in there, not saying you have to be so proud of your answer, but where would you put that line in regards to religious rights, but then also the rights for a religion to take from others? Like you're saying, 50 years ago, interracial marriage, they can claim religious whatever, just as now, if you're a gay couple instigating at a church trying to stir something up, where, let's say it becomes a notable, like that particular, the bakery case, that gets to the Supreme Court, how is that managed in 21st century America, where religion has to exist and the government has to exist? How do we establish a avenue for these things so it doesn't become semantics like the abortion debate?
You know, like I think it's when you go to church and stuff and everything, like I feel like, you know, they already have, like, you know, and stuff, their set of beliefs that you have to adhere to be a member. So like I think it's really strange when people have their own ideologies and try to come in and, like, you know, change or force, like, you know, and stuff and everything. Obviously, like the church has changed, and obviously that's something that's been going on since, like, you know, beginning of churches. Like, you know, Martin Luther, like, you know, he broke away from Catholicism because he had some alternate views. So like, I mean, obviously that works, and sometimes, like, you know, society will become more evolved over time and stuff and everything. And you see that, like, you know, and stuff and everything with gay marriage and stuff and everything. Like, you know, there's churches and stuff where, like, you know, and stuff, they're super open to, like, you know, the LGBTQ community, and they're about social justice and stuff and everything. I would think, if, like, you know, and stuff and everything, I would recommend if people try to go to churches and stuff that fit their lifestyle, opposed to, like, you know, and stuff and everything. Like, why try to fit, you know, a square peg in a round hole, you know? So
I guess I have a more kind of melting pot view still, but like I know the euphemism over the past like 3 decades or so has changed from like the melting pot of America to the salad bowl, where like we all coexist but we don't mix together. I just think that's a recipe for disaster, and like the idea that like we should just support everybody like tunneling away like in their little like tribes of like what they believe is right, and like we don't have to let anybody else in, and we don't have to talk to anybody else and be self-sufficient. Like I talk about this with the Black community all the time, like the idea of like Black exclusionism. Like we're just only going to buy Black, we're going to live on our own land, we're only going to be on like this secret Black power grid. And it's just like, what the fuck are y'all talking about? Like this shit ain't going to work. We're 13% of a very large country. Like we all going to blend in here a little bit. I think like that's sort of my view. Like if I'm looking at that spectrum, it's like it's 90% secular because, well, we have to tolerate all kinds of people. So every exception that we make for Catholicism, we have to make for Buddhism and Hinduism and all the way down the line. You know what I mean? And so, cool. When I look at things like holidays, right? So if we're going to acknowledge every religious holiday, fuck, nobody would go to work, right? But so like we acknowledge like 80% of the Catholic holidays, and so do like Muslims have a gripe? Sure. You know what I mean? So how do we account for that? I don't know. I guess we let Muslim kids take Rosh Hashanah off from school, regardless if that's on the calendar or not. And we teach teachers not to be douches to them when they have to like come in hungry because they've been fasting. And be like, what's wrong with your test scores this week? And it's like, oh, I haven't eaten in 4 days. You know what I mean? I think it's that like level of like religious tolerance that we need to apply to all religions. But I think secularity is kind of like the guiding principle of government. It's like, we have to have some humanity and some like moral rule of law that isn't uniquely attached to like one chain of beliefs, I guess.
Right.
When it comes to some higher power.
So then last question on subject of religion, and it can be short, whatever you want to.
I think you get the short answer.
Yeah.
You're a funny guy.
Taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Should religions and religious entities, anything you want to put under that umbrella, be exempt in any manner from taxes? Go on that. Just in regards,
I will give you a short answer. I don't have strong feelings on this.
Okay, because especially in regards to like corporations and things like that, there's that side of things, and there's a very big difference between 21st century religion, like you're saying that there's every Catholic holiday, whereas Hindu, Muslim aren't on there. Same thing with, it's not quite the same tax playing field that it was in the 1800s, 1900s. With that line of church and state, how does that apply to tax season?
I guess like so long as you're running a house of worship in good faith, like I think you should be tax exempt if you're a religious charity or whatever. Like I have no problem with you having tax exemptions. I think to your point, that gets a little murkier when you look at like corporations or like political like PACs or even like universities, like academia, just like stockpiling money away that they don't get taxed on. I think a lot of that's super sketchy. But like generally speaking, like it's tough for me as a secular person to be like, hey, like you're actually not like godly enough. You need to kick in 10% instead of 0%. But you guys over here with the mega church, you pay 20%. Like start legislating like who's worshiping the right way and how much they need to pay. See, like that's not for me. You know, I don't think that's what the government really said. I think that's how we agreed to the kind of the tax exemption being so broad. It's like, hey man, if it's like vaguely religious, I'm not going to touch it. And do I think that has some flaws? For sure. But back to like a whole like religious freedom under secularity thing, it's like if that's the game we got to play to keep everybody happy and keep fucking religious zealots from bombing schools and other ones from shooting them, I'm cool. You know what I mean? None of you guys pay taxes. Maybe we can take the AKs.
Yeah, I pretty much like have agreement like with him. I think like obviously like there's going to be some areas where it's misused and stuff and everything. Like I go to Liberty University online, and like it's not even really an educational institution; it's a real estate hedge fund. So I mean, I think like I would like to see like as far as like there being accounting of like where like this money is being spent. I think like what I mean, and stuff that's really important, and maybe like being able to review that, maybe to set up some way where it's fair and like to regulate that. But
Very good. Consensus there.
Consensus.
Very good. I'm good on that.
Okay. Let me stop that.